You tell us how you got involved, and especially how and when you got connected to Charles Hardner, Hulk Hogan's lawyer in the Gawker case, and why you did this, secretly.
Well, it was a multi-year. I have to be a little bit careful what I comment on this since the litigation is still ongoing. But I got involved over a number of years, and it was one of these things where, as you got involved, you came to believe in the justice of the case more and more, because there were so many different people that you interacted with who had been destroyed. In many cases, in most cases, it was not super prominent people. It was or super wealthy people. It was people who couldn't afford to do anything. And one of the striking things is that if you're middle class, if you're upper middle class, if you're a single-digit millionaire like Hulk Hogan, you have no effective access to our legal system. It costs too much. And this was the modus operandi of Gawker in large part. It was to go after people who had no chance of fighting back. We can debate about whether the more appropriate thing for me would have been to be transparent about funding it all the way through. But my judgment was that Mr. Hogan deserved to have his day in court, and that would have distracted from his day in court. That transparency in that would have turned it into this very different narrative, into the Gawker narrative that it's the billionaire trying to squash the First Amendment, rather than what I think it was actually about, which was an egregious violation of privacy, the publication of a sex tape.
Well, speaking of, Charles Harder has now developed a reputation as the go-to lawyer for the rich and powerful when they want to threaten media outlets. He now represents Roger Ailes against the New York Magazine, Melania Trump against the Daily Mail. As a libertarian, do you feel this is a threat to freedom of the press in any way? And how would you characterize what he does?
I'm not going to speak to all the. I'm not familiar with all the details of all the litigation. I'm not underwriting any of those lawsuits, just to be very clear. I do think what actually matters in litigation is what happens at the end game. It's sort of like if you want to understand litigation, it's like the Capablanca line in chess. You must begin by studying the end game. You must begin by thinking about, do you actually ultimately win or lose? And if you bring a harassing lawsuit and you lose, that also sets a precedent, and that's a precedent for greater press freedom over time. And so I think that when one brings litigation, you have to think all the way through to the end game. And I wouldn't do it because, number one, I think the First Amendment should be respected. But number two, many of these sorts of cases I wouldn't bring because I think you ultimately won't win. It's very different from Gawker, where we could map out with a high level of certitude that if we had our day at court, we would win.